Hello, welcome to the show, the live stream. So it's been a while. I caught COVID and I had a bunch of problems with Pulumi and getting AKS set up in the last stream. And I hadn't really solved any of them until now. So it is kind of good timing getting COVID if they could be a good time. We're gonna take what we did last time, which was set up a really basic Kubernetes cluster. We didn't get it actually deployed last time, but I did manage to do it off live stream. And I'll just explain how I managed to do that, and then we'll go and make improvements. There's a ton of improvements you can do to a deployment of Kubernetes in Azure. It's a very complicated beast, so we'll look at some of that, and we'll also make improvements to our Pulumi code to make sure it's nice and contained and kind of separation of concerns and all the rest of it. So let's dig right in. And this is what I managed to deploy over here. So we got our common resource group over here, and it contains just some log analytics stuff. We have our Northern Europe resource group here, which contains the Kubernetes cluster itself and a virtual network and a network watcher. And then we have the nodes over here, which contains all the virtual machines and all the rest of it, the scale set and everything. I'm not sure why there's two. I think this was the old one. I think that should have been deleted. Not sure why that has not been deleted. Oh, resource not found. Okay. Sometimes the Azure dashboard is a bit rubbish and it doesn't update itself. But you can see all the resources here, and I'm well below my spending limit of about £110 or whatever. So let's have a look at the code. So last time I left you, I tried deploying this application. The GitHub, it's on GitHub. You can find the link in the description below. And we didn't manage to deploy, and that was pretty much only because I had to update the NuGet packages. And in particular, I think it was this one here that had a bug in it. And we'll just update this one here as well now to make sure that we're always on the latest. So I think that was stopping us from deploying. Very strange. And as soon as I updated, it all started to work again. So there was that change. And then I also made a very few other changes. So I added just like a support URL, some tags to these. So these are Azure Active Directory objects that I'm creating. So I'm creating an application, service principal, and a password. So I added some tags to these. This is just a list of strings, and I took the existing tags function that I had, and I just turned that in from a dictionary of string to a list of string, and separate that by an equal sign. So that's that. What else did I change? Nothing much here. I added a few comments here. As I was reading the Azure Kubernetes Service docs, I added a few comments. We'll go through those. I have a ton of notes to talk about. So we got all these kind of improvements over here on my scratch pad, waiting to be made. I think that was it. Yeah, so first thing I want to do is we need to break this up. The code is getting pretty long, and the way to do that in Pulumi is to split things up into resources. So I have an example of a resource here, and you have to inherit from component resource. It has to have a name, component resource options, those get passed in. And then in here, you can continue to build up those things. So the first thing I want to do is not a virtual network, is actually take all of this code over here for the Azure Active Directory application, the service principal and the password, and pull that out into, I'm going to call it an identity resource. Identity resource. Oh. And we'll rename this. And I think we should be able to, did that rename this as well? Yes, it did. Sometimes renaming in Visual Studio is a bit silly. It doesn't know what it's doing, especially if you copy and paste. So we'll take that code there and dump it in here. Then we want to, we also need the location. It looks like we need a few other bits and bobs here. The location and these tags. So we'll go back to our previous class. We'll pull out some of this code here and paste it down here. This builds up the tags. But I also need to put this function into a common location. So I'm gonna add a class and move that tag function into that. So I'll call that tag helper. And this is just gonna be a static class, public static. And we'll make that public function. And we need a configuration as well, don't we? You know what? Maybe this function can go into the configuration class itself. So we can stick that towards the bottom there. Get tags. This.config. And it can't be static. Config this dot application name, this dot environment, and then the location. And we'll change that to an iDictionary. New dictionary string get tags, and we'll add this to our iConfiguration interface, so it's available to all our consumers. So now I don't need this tag helper class. We can get rid of that, and we can go back to our stack, get rid of this, all of these tag functions, and I'm going to get rid of all of this stuff over here. Get tags becomes configuration dot get tags. Import map of string. You know what? I think converting that to an iDictionary might have been a mistake, because everything requires dictionary. This implicit conversion, I think. iDictionary to input map, and that, yeah, that gets fixed. So we'll just add configuration dot to get tags, and then we need our application and service principal password over here in a moment. Oh, come on, there we go. So we'll come and fix this in a moment. We can remove the Azure AD namespace, and over here we'll need to come and fix some of this. So we want configuration dot get tags over here as well. Cool. And in fact, we could move all of these functions as well to the configuration class. So we could say public, and this is get tags. And this is not static anymore. This dot environment, oh, that's system dot environment dot new line, and this is this dot. Is that going to go green? So this can be a read-only collection, can't it? I read only put this dot there. I think that's everything. So we'll just take that, stick it in the interface as well. Cool. And we can come back here and say creation dot and we're calling this function multiple times. We can pull it up. Active directory tags. Stick that in there as well, and we have a description here as well. So the description is just, we're setting it in the notes and the description for this service principal. So it shows up in the UI and you can see them. I don't know why I'm setting tags. I can't actually see them in the UI. I'll show you in a second. I'll just rename that to Azure Active Directory. I like to have proper names. I don't mind if they're a bit long. And then we need to set a location. It doesn't like the read-only list here. I think I need to set that to a proper list and not worry about this warning. And we'll go back here and change that as well. Cool. So we need a location now, and we can set that string location. And then I think we can just go back to our stack here and say var identity resource equals new identity resource, give it a name, think about what we need to do there, and then new component resource options. I'm not sure what you can pass in here. Am I debugging? I'm not debugging. What's that all about? Clone, merge providers, resource options. ID parent depends on, ignore changes. I'm not sure the best way to pass parameters to custom resources like this. I think we don't need the name. We do need to set an output. So we should do that. So we need specifically we need the application ID and service principal password. We need these two guys as outputs. So public output string application ID. We call that client ID. I don't know why Azure uses so many different names for different things. They use client ID, application ID, and several other bits and pieces, all to mean the same thing. And this is the client secret. So we're going to go this dot client ID equals that. This dot secret equals that. So we now have two outputs. I'm not sure. We need to figure out how to pass parameters to this without using statics. That would be nice. There may be some way to pass it using this resource options thing. I'm not really sure how to do that yet. So we'll go back to our stack and we'll say identity dot client ID and identity client secret. So you can see here Azure is using client ID and client secret. Doesn't make any sense, but that's the way it is. So that we need to set the configuration here as well. Configuration. And we need to set this inside here. Location equals location. So we're setting it as static. I don't really like this. Not sure what this name is for. We need to come back to this and fix all of these oversights. Maybe we'll come back and have a look at, maybe we should read the documentation first. So component resource, if I go here and Google Pulumi, oops, what happened? Pulumi component resource, zoom in a bit, components, component resource, here we go. It has a name. What did I do for the name? So configuration, application name, colon, and then the name of the type, identity resource. So that's the name of this resource. I don't know why we have to pass in this name over here. The unique name of the resource. Okay. Okay, so this is like the type name. Yeah, the type of the resource. Okay, so that's the type name, and then this is the unique name, and then we have options. Signal to the UI that this resource has completed instruction. Register outputs. Do we need to call that? Looks like we do. It says register synthetic outputs that all components has initialized, usually by allocating other child sub-resources, propagating the results. Component resources should always call this at the end of their constructor to indicate they are done creating child resources. While not strictly necessary, this helps the experience by ensuring UI transitions the component resource to the complete state as quickly as possible. instead of waiting until the entire application completes. Okay, so that's pretty important. We need that. Outputs. Okay, so we have to pass in outputs here. So we have output dictionary. Okay, maybe we'll read the documentation a little bit more. Package module type. Creating child resources. Here we have a dictionary. They're passing in a dictionary. We should do that as well. Is done registering children, should be considered providers. One option all resources have is the ability to pass an explicit resource provider to supply explicit configuration settings. For example, you may want to ensure that all AWS resources are created in a different region than the globally configured region. In the case of component resources, the challenge is that these providers must flow from parent to children. To allow this component resources accept a provider's option that custom resources don't have, this value contains a map from the provider name to the explicit provider instance to use for the component resource. This map is used by the component resource to fetch the proper provider object to use for any child resources. This example overrides the globally configured AWS region. Okay, so this is how we pass options to our component resource. So we'll come back to that and we'll look at dealing with this first. String and we'll call it client ID. And client secret, and we can get rid of these two things because that's not the correct way to pass resources here. Why is this complaining? The best overloaded add method has some invalid arguments. Is this a string? It's an output of string. This is an output of string. So does this need to be output of string? String object. Okay. iDictionary object, nullable object. So that's not that. Object nullable. That should work. Cool. So now I can register outputs. Now I need to figure out how I can pass options in here. So if we go back and copy and paste this code, we can paste that in here and pass these options. What's this complaining about? List of provider resources. And these are lists of provider resources. So we have configuration. What is a provider resource anyway? It's a custom resource. Resource. It has an ID. resource type, and I guess a value. So let's stick that in there and see what happens. No overload for method. Add takes 2 arguments. List of provider resources. Package name. What was going on here? It's just implicitly created, so maybe I can try that. No overload for add. Takes 2 arguments. It looks like a dictionary, but it's a list of provider resources. Yeah, I think the documentation is not great here. Maybe if I looked at the TypeScript. Nope. I wonder if I need more information. We learned how to register outputs. We didn't learn how to pull them out again either. So we have our identity resource. How do we get resource name? How do we pull out the output? There seems to be no way to do so. I think we need better documentation here. Resources. Let's see, there's a blog post here. Component. So this component resource, name, content args, domain. Can we just add arbitrary parameters to the constructor? That would be easy. Let's just try doing that. So we want high configuration. String location. We can get rid of these can be we don't strictly need these properties anymore. Have to change a bunch of these from uppercase to lowercase. What's it complaining about here? Is not null here. configuration is non-null before using it. Oh, check if it's non-null. It is non-null. So we'll just add one of those, I think. I don't know what it's talking about here. Externally visible method. Validate parameter configuration is non-null before using it. Oh, okay. That's just a oh, but yeah, I think that's fine. We can suppress that one. Because we're passing it into the base, it's not going to be easy to actually validate it before you pass it in. And then over here, you can get rid of these two lines of code, pass in configuration and location, and we can get rid of this. And now we need to learn how to pull out these outputs. I suspect we can bring back the properties. I think this register outputs thing doesn't really talk about it anywhere. Maybe if we go to the Pulumi GitHub, Pulumi GitHub, search for that in the organization. Register outputs usage is not clear. Here we go. I'd say it's not even clear to us. Is this guy working for Pulumi? We need to update our docs. It's not clear. So after a year and a half, it's still not clear how to use register outputs. Would you mind giving us some hints? So yeah, I think people talked about doing this. It's just a signal to the UI, to the CLI, it seems. Okay, so I think that's it. And then we go here and we're all working again. Let's see if this works. And I have my test configuration here as well. I'm just gonna pass. What shall I do here? This is for my tests, implements iConfiguration. And I guess I should copy the implementation from the real one. I will work out how to share some of this code so I don't have to do that later. But if I run my tests now, they should still work. I'm hoping. I just have the one test to make sure that all resources have tags. This doesn't test the identity resources though in Azure Active Directory, because those tags are different. They're a list of string rather than a dictionary of string. So we'll maybe have a look at that in a moment. And at the same time, I think we can try deploying. So let's see if everything still works, or if we've broken everything. I had previously deployed everything and it was all good. So let's see. In theory, nothing should have changed. I did update Pulumi before I went live, so it's downloading the plugin again, which only happens the first time you run it after you update Pulumi. So it's now creating a single identity resource. One thing to create. Okay, so it's creating, so it's saying that it has one more thing to create, my identity resource. That's interesting. So it's created, that didn't take very long at all. So it looks like nothing has changed except the fact that it created this resource and registered it with this name. That was it. So that seems to have been successful. So we'll commit that, add identity resource. So we'll commit that. And now we have a nice separation of concerns where all our identity stuff for Azure Active Directory is in a single class, which is looking nice. And the next step would be to do the same for this virtual network stuff over here. So I'm just going to cut that and paste that into this virtual network resource. We do need to call this dot register outputs at the end. And what do we need to pass in here? We need our configuration, same like before. configuration, and then this is a lowercase c. This static can go, and then we need to import some namespaces, and I have no idea which one that is. Let's go and check what namespace this was. Control click that. And it's in Pulumi Azure native.network. There are a lot of namespaces in Pulumi, so it's sometimes difficult to figure out what namespace you need. We need a location, and we have this address space thing, network inputs, I think it is, yep. And we need a resource group that everything goes into as well. The resource group is going to be, do we need a resource group? We just need a resource group name. So that's this resource group here. So we'll delete this code. For virtual network resource equals new virtual network resource. We'll give it a name in a second. Oh, let's just do it now. Virtual network, and we need to pass configuration location, resource group name, and we need to string put that together. That is all. And we need to suppress this warning. Cool. So if we go back now, why is it still complaining? Oh, it's an output of string. Maybe we can just pass the resource group is fine. I'll put a dot back in here. Why is it complaining here now? Okay. We can add null check for all parameters. That's not correct, is it? We should have done that in the other one as well, really. Argument null exception. This can be changed to throw if null configuration. Well, it's going to throw here. Because that gets called first, so I can assume that configuration is not null. And like to check for null separately. It's nicer to have separate error messages for empty and null, so you know the difference. Can be useful. Do I need to pass in a param name here? I can't remember. There was that new feature. Yeah, caller argument expression. Yeah, we don't. Okay. So let's go back to the virtual network resource and do the same thing. Name, location, and resource group. Oops, what happened? And name cannot be empty. You can get rid of that one. Cannot be empty. Did they add? They didn't add this param name thing there. Resource group is null. We did that one. Cool. So we have our validation and we have our resource now. What outputs do we need? Didn't I? Okay, yeah, I forgot to do that. Why is it complaining? Elements should have the same indentation. Here we go. And then we have the subnet ID, which we need as an output. So we need to go here and go public output. I believe it's a string. Subnet ID. Subnet ID equals subnet.id. And that is a string, so that's all good. That indentation looks a bit off. I think I can just do that. Cool. And this can just be virtual network resource dot subnet ID. And now we need to actually create the Kubernetes cluster resource. So we'll just copy and paste the identity one, I guess. We should probably check that we didn't break anything first. So let's do that. Let's do a Pulumi up. Let's build everything and run Pulumi up. Create virtual network resource. Let's see how that goes. Hopefully that should just pass. My machine's humming away there as it's running .NET Build, I guess. I don't know if you can hear it. After this, I have a bunch of improvements to the Kubernetes cluster itself. I've been reading the Azure documentation here for Kubernetes, for AKS specifically. And the most useful pages I found are these how-to guides. So I've gone through up to here and discovered a bunch of code changes that you should ideally make for a good productionized AKS cluster. And then I haven't quite got to the security and authentication, configuring private clusters, networking. I know our network is definitely not correct. All the subnet IDs and things could be improved. Volumes, monitoring and logging. There's a few other bits and pieces here that we could go through. So I will do that, and maybe in the next stream we can take a look at that stuff, or maybe we can make a start in this stream. So it's created our virtual network resource. That totally worked. Next thing, split off the Kubernetes resource. We'll create that. We'll just copy and paste this into here actually. And we'll call this, did I rename this guy? Yes, I did. So we'll just call this maybe I should call it Kubernetes cluster resource, because at some point we're going to have another resource for the things we're going to put inside our cluster. So for example, we'll add a deployment which contains all the pods and everything, a service, ingress, all of those sorts of objects. We could call those Kubernetes objects resource, or maybe deployment resource. We'll come back to that question later. Kubernetes cluster resource, or we'll just call it Kubernetes cluster, Kubernetes resource for now. Naming is hard. So we now have our Kubernetes resource, and we're gonna validate all the stuff, and we don't need all of this. We need register outputs, and we're gonna go to our stack and take this cluster and stick it in here. Fix up some of this namespace soup resource group. We need a resource group. I should have copied the other one really. We need a resource group, and that needs a namespace. We also need the validation for that. Where'd it go? Yeah, that guy. Put that there. Don't need that dev test lab thing. Don't need the 0AD. Let's check the namespaces on the other ones. That's fine. It's still complaining. We don't need these guys. We just need the kube config as an output. So we'll set that in a second. We'll create some of these types. Fix that up. Fix that up. Indentation. Not sure why that got messed up. Virtual network resource subnet ID. So we need a virtual network resource here as well. So we'll just check for null on that as well. So we're passing that in, and we'll just go with a lowercase c here. And we also need the identity resource. So this is where everything kind of combines into this one object. It's still complaining here. Non-nullable kube config must be set. Okay, yeah, we'll do that. So get kube config is a function down here. I'll move that down in here. And fix up the namespaces. Fix up the indentation, and then copy and paste this line of code over here. Get kube config. Oh, this dot kube config equals that. Okay. That's looking good, I think. And we'll create our give that a name. It's unclear to me whether we need a dash on the end for these custom resources, because as far as I can work out, Pulumi is not adding some random stuff to the end of it. So we may be able to remove that. That has simplified the code here quite considerably. You can see now what's going on. So we're creating a common resource group, getting a workspace here created. We need to move that into another resource as well. We'll do that in a second. and then iterating over our locations as specified in our config. So we could have multiple clusters created just by adding one more location here. So we could be like, you know, Canada Central or whatever. Oops. And then for each of those, we're creating a new Azure application, service principal and password, creating a new Kubernetes resource group for that location, creating a new virtual network and a new Kubernetes resource, and then pulling out the kubeconfig and specifying that as the output. So the only place we're creating resource groups is in this class. So that function can stay here, but we do need to move this log analytics workspace function out into a new resource, and we can get rid of a lot of these namespaces now, and we don't have all this namespace soup going on at the top. So it's looking a lot cleaner here for our stack, and we should test to make sure that, whoops, I forgot to change the name message, create Kubernetes resource. So let's just make sure that that still works. I'm just going to check that in. And we'll start work on our new log analytics workspace. What should we call that resource? Common resource. It's going to be in our common resource group. We could call it that. There may be other common things we need to add to our common resource group, so it may be a good name to use. We could also call it, yeah, we'll call it common resource for now. I'm just going to copy and paste the, what do we need? What are we passing in here? We're passing in the common resource group and the location only. So I'll copy and paste the virtual network one. We'll call this common resource. And did I actually set, yep, I did. Common resource, and these settings are all fine, these are all fine, and we'll just delete all of this code here, and the output is going to be different. I'm not sure what it's going to be just yet. We'll grab this guy over here, paste that in there. New workspace, I don't know what type that is. It's a operational insights workspace. So we'll just grab those namespaces, stick them in here, and we should be good. Configuration, get tags. Stick that semicolon in there, and we'll delete that code. And we'll say new common resource, and we need to give it a name. Configuration.common location, and then we need configuration, we need the common location, we need the common resource group. So we now have our common resource. And where do we pass that in? We don't actually use the log analytics workspace anywhere, interestingly enough. Oh yeah, we will need it. We will need it in the Kubernetes stack. So if we, in the Kubernetes resource, we commented out this code here, and we will need the workspace ID. So that's what we should output here. So this should be workspace ID. Workspace ID, space ID. So that's the output, and then we need to pass it into the Kubernetes stack as well. So this is going to be the first resource, common resource. You almost wonder if IOC would have been a good thing to add here. And that's going to be common resource dot workspace ID when we uncomment this and figure out why it didn't work. And we're going to pass that in here as well. Cool. Let's create that. Oh, I always forget to update the message, and we'll commit that as well. So it looks like that should go through nicely now. So we now have a really nice simple stack that you can read all on one screen. You don't need to scroll. And simple resources as well, split up. Oh, there was one other thing I changed. Since the last stream, I found that in here, in the service principal password, I was adding an end date, and I kept using datetime.today.add 100 years. And every time I ran Pulumi up, it would recreate this resource because the date kept changing every day. So I realized that this needs to be a fixed date. So that's why I put in like almost the year 3000. And I also created this. I also found that if you use datetime.toString with the, I think the Z format specifier, it creates an invalid time string, and it's really looking for RFC 3339. And I had to create an extension method over here just to output that using XML convert.toString. I just copied this from Stack Overflow. So yeah, so that's the one thing I changed there as well, apart from adding these notes and tags over here. Cool. So now let's just make sure that worked. Yep, created the common resource. That's all good. Let's actually we'll go for a bit longer and start making some changes to our Kubernetes cluster as well, making some improvements. We probably should pull out some of this, extract this into a separate function. Extract method, validate. And so we got all our validation code out here. And we want to move that below that property there. And we can do the same over here. This just makes for This just makes for a cleaner constructor there. And I'll just stick that in there. And identity, we'll just do the same here. Let's paste that below the properties. I'm using style cop, so all my code looks a certain way, and the order of properties and methods and various members is determined by style cop, so it wants everything in a particular look and feel. Validate functions, so that should still work. So if we go back to our Kubernetes resource, close the other tabs, the first thing we can do to make improvements is go and add a scale set eviction policy, which I think goes in here if I remember correctly. No? Scale set eviction policy. Yep, it does. So why did that not work? Okay, so this guy determines when the nodes that are scaled down are just deleted. But that's actually cheaper. That's a good thing. But it does take a lot longer to bring them back up again. So the other alternative is to use deallocate, which stops the virtual machines instead of deleting them. So you still pay for the any operating system license that you need, like if you're using Windows nodes. I'm using Linux nodes, so that's not a problem for me. There's a bit more about it in this blog post over here. Scale down mode. Where does it say Windows? There was deallocated. It talks a bit more about it here somewhere. Scale down mode. Here we go. Deallocate. I think deallocate should be the default, because if you're using Linux nodes. But there was a bit about cost here that is worth looking into. If you're using Windows, it's going to be more expensive because you're paying for the Windows license. I think that's right. I did read a bit here somewhere where it said it could be costly to deallocate, but I can't find where that was. By default, blah blah blah. You'll not be charged for VM compute resources. However, you still need to pay for any OS and data storage disks attached to the VM. So data storage disks are pretty cheap. So I would say deallocate is fine. But if you wanted to save a buck, you could. Yeah, there you go, Peter. In the chat. If I can bring that up, is it going to work? I do have a thing where it shows highlighted comments from users. Peter has just commented the storage managed disk attached to the VM. That's right. So that is the cost. But in development, I think it's worth maybe setting the policy to delete. and in production setting it to deallocate. So we could set this up in configuration. So scale set eviction policy. So we could go and add a configuration item here, and we'll call it we could call it the same thing as Kubernetes here. I'm going to prefix some of these with the word Kubernetes. Kubernetes scale set eviction policy, and we'll call that the same thing. And now we can pull it out of config and and set that up so that if in production we use deallocate, and in development we use so in here we're going to do deallocate. This is development, so I want delete, and we'll create a copy of this file and call it production. And in production we want deallocate, so we get faster scale up and scale down, faster scale up. Yeah. And the type of this we want is not actually a string, it's scale set eviction policies. So we'll use that and bring that in, and we want enum.parse this guy. And we can pass in the type here. Of course it's there that we want to set that. And we want to do that in our configuration also. And in here, and we'll just default it here to delete as for our tests. That's all fine. So we'll just add some comments here about what this is doing as well. So delete is the default, stops the node when scaling down. This is faster to scale up, and deallocate stops and deletes nodes when scaling down. This is cheaper. So that's our first setting. We should also add configuration for all of these items over here. So like the number of nodes, Kubernetes node count, things like that. Public int node count, and this is an integer, so we need to do that and pass that name in there. And in development we're going to have node count of 1, and in production we'll just do like a node count of 3, which is the recommended actually from Azure. So recommended minimum of 3. So we can do here, we can now do configuration dot node count, Kubernetes node count. I forgot to do in the interface. Forgot to add it to the interface. And we should probably add some validation to it as well, to be honest. So the maximum value that can be set to is 100. So I'm going to add some helper functions here to help me parse out some things, some config. So private int get integer, and we want the string name. I'm just going to copy this for now, and we're going to have some copy that name in here, and we also want to have some value equals that if int minimum int maximum, if value is if minimum dot has value and value is less than minimum, we want to throw here. And we want to say the error message has to say something like must be more than that. Oh, I forgot to add a new. Silly me. And we'll also add validation for maximum. Maximum is more than the maximum, must be less than the maximum, and then we want to return the value. Get integer, and then we can replace this guy. Get integer, minimum is 0. 0 is allowed. You can actually scale the number of your Kubernetes nodes down to 0 when you don't have any workload, which may be useful. And the maximum is 100 as specified by the documentation. And I'm just going to quickly change the rest of this as well so that it's using my new helper function to get integers. And in fact, I don't know if we need any of these. I need that CPU, memory, container, current requests. We'll keep these for now. We'll need them later on when it comes to actually adding a workload to our Kubernetes cluster. And we'll also default these values equals 0, equals null, so you don't have to pass them. And here just get rid of that, make some space, and we'll stick this in any place we're using int.parse. Get rid of that, get rid of that, get rid of you, and get rid of you. Cool. And we also have double.parse container CPU, but we'll come back to that. I will do the rest offline. We could also pull out enum.pars and things like that, but we'll come back to that. So now we have Kubernetes node count, maximum pods, Kubernetes max pods. So we could add another setting here, Kubernetes max pods, maximum pods. And the minimum, I guess there is no maximum. And the minimum has to be 1, probably. Just adding some sensible, just do that in alphabetical order. Just adding some sensible validation there. And we'll stick that in our configuration as well. And stick that in here. Maximum pods. Maximum is 250. Okay, so there is a maximum. 1. Maximum 250. Might be nice to add some of these keywords here so that people can see it without having to use that Visual Studio feature, which adds that. And we need to go back and add it to our configuration here, and we're just gonna do the max of 250, I think, for both. And then once you have a real workload over there, you'd probably want to reduce the maximum number of pods after you've measured how many you can run on a particular node. But for now, I think 250 is fine. Keep it open. Agent pool mode, system. I'm not really sure what this means, but I think you have to have one system pool. I think the system pool is where the does it tell you here represents the mode of, yeah, I'm not really sure what that is. I've been meaning to look into that. You can either choose system or user. The name of the node pool is default. You can get rid of that. The OS disk size in gigabytes. This should probably be controlled by config as well. Linux, OS type Linux. Use the enum if it's available. We want Linux. And get the tags, get the type, virtual machine scale set, VM size. This is a good candidate for moving over to configuration. I'll do some of this offline. I think some of this might be a bit boring to do online. And the subnet ID. So let's jump on to the next big thing that we need to do. So we need to set up, we can set up a maintenance window. So let's go have a look at this bit of documentation here. So a maintenance window determines when your Kubernetes cluster can be upgraded by Azure. And to do that, we need to create this object called a maintenance configuration. And we can do that. I found an object in Azure in the Azure native stack here where we can create one of these things. So let's have a look. I've Let's copy the code and see if we can create one. So if I just go here, paste that in, container service, we can create a maintenance configuration. We'll give it a name in a second. And we need to give it, let's fix up the indentation a little bit. Config name of the maintenance configuration. I don't think we need that if we're setting the name up here. Could be wrong. I'm gonna come in here and do that. Give it a nice name. New time span args. Not allowed time. Resource group name. We need to pass in. There's that guy. Resource name. The name of the managed cluster resource. So this, I think we need to build after the Kubernetes cluster itself. And we need to take the, I'll call that managed cluster. Call it what it is. And we'll go here and we'll give it name. I think that's right. Time in a week. Weekday time slots allowed to upgrade. So I think what I'm gonna do is allow any day, but not allow the upgrade to happen on any day, but not allow it during the daytime, and only allow it during the nighttime. So what this can do, time slots on which upgrade is not allowed. This has a date in it, that's a bit weird. Time in week. Unclear to me how to use this thing. Let's try to read some of the config. Time slots on which upgrade is not allowed. Weekday time slots allowed to upgrade. A day in the week. Hour slots in the day. Time span. Let's see what this documentation says. From 1 to 2 o'clock every Monday. Following example output shows maintenance window from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock every Monday. So I think if I do day equals weekday Monday, a day in the week, and then do, yeah, between 1 and 3 o'clock. I think this is what this means. Hour slots 1 and 3 o'clock in the night. That seems reasonable to me. And then do that for all the weekdays. So I'm gonna just time in week input list. Let's just quickly private time in week args. Get time in week args. I don't want a giant list here. Come on. Oh, it's a struct. Interesting. Okay. I think I can do new weekday dot Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then do dot select. So days equal that. Days dot select. Oops. Select this. And this is going to be the day and hour slot. And then this becomes an IEnumerable. And we'll set that over here. This is not allowed because it's not a list. And we'll do a to list on here. Still not allowed. Oh. Can be marked as static. That's fine. Just move that below the validation. It's the last thing that's used, so maybe I can just move it to the bottom. Really, this is something, the hour slots are something that you want to set in configuration maybe, because in development, you don't really care too much when the upgrade takes place. For now, I think this is hard coded, it's fine. Maybe I'll switch this to use configuration off screen. We don't need this dot here. Okay, so now we have a maintenance configuration and we don't need to do anything with it. Let's see if we can run Pulumi up and create maintenance configuration. Let's see what that does. Hopefully that should work. Once that's done, we can look at the next piece. It's almost like you want to set a cron syntax to this and then build this up, because it's kind of a bit unwieldy. Like if I wanted to set this from oh, I don't need not allowed time anymore, I think. It's updating the managed cluster. Oh, that's because I added the scale set eviction policy earlier. Oh, I didn't get this from configuration either. That's no good. Kubernetes scale set eviction policy. There we go. And updating the managed cluster. It's going to create the maintenance configuration for us. In the meantime, we can maybe look at the next thing. The next thing is setting the maximum surge. So this one is interesting. I think it goes in here. Upgrade settings. Let's put that down here and let's cut some of this stuff out. So the maximum surge determines the number during an upgrade, determines the maximum number of nodes that get taken down and upgraded. Number of nodes to upgrade at the same time. Now the issue with that is if you say 100%, that will create, let's say you had 10 nodes and you say 100% for max surge. That means it's going to create a 10 new nodes with the latest version of Kubernetes on them, and then take down your entire cluster, add those nodes to the cluster, and then take down the old ones. So the recommended amount in the documentation is actually 33%. So like they take down 1/3 of your cluster. Well, they add 1/3 of extra nodes, remove the 1/3 old nodes, then do the next third and the next third. Okay, so the maintenance configuration succeeded. Let's see what happens if we add upgrade settings. So this can be controlled by configuration also. I'll do that later. What's going on here with these namespaces? The next configuration item is automatic upgrades, but it is 11 o'clock over here and we're going for we've been live for a while. How long exactly? Where does it even say? I don't know. So what we'll do is we'll pick this up in the next stream. We'll do a part 3, and then part 4 will be creating the actual deployments, the services, the ingress, and actually running a container on our new Kubernetes cluster. So we'll pick that up next time. We still need to fix up some of this network stuff. We still need to add our log analytics workspace. We still have a ton of things that I have made a note of over here, and there's more that I'm still reading in the documentation as well. And then before the next stream, I'll also go back and migrate some more of these settings over to configuration, so that those can be easily changed in the development and production environments. So we'll have more Kubernetes settings down here, and yeah, I think that's it for now. Oh, we got an error over here. What's happening? Type provided must be an enum. Is it complaining about this? Enum.parse. Oh, value. Did I get that wrong? I'll work that out anyway. And so yeah, we'll pick this up next week. If you haven't already, do like and subscribe. It helps the channel out. Don't have many subscribers. We're just doing this for fun mostly. And then you can always ping me on Twitter as well if you have any questions or anything like that. And you can kind of visit me on my blog as well and contact me directly, email me. So yeah, thank you very much for watching.